Hello everybody, welcome to another Transformative Teachers webinar. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, there are signs of spring. Buds are appearing on the trees. The days are getting a little bit milder. Well, here in the UK, in the south of UK to be specific. I think it could be any kind of weather in the rest of the country, but things are looking up here. I hope that it's a lovely day where you are. In Spain, you're expecting snow, I see from somebody in the chat. Yes, well, that comes along with the poor buds appearing on the trees in some places, doesn't it? And I see that we have people from all around the world today. There's Greece, Spain, Italy, Saudi Arabia, India, Vietnam, Peru, Mexico, Argentina, India. I love it. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So welcome wherever you are. So first of all, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I will introduce Chris, and then I will hand over to him. So first, with our housekeeping, I'll just share again briefly. So this webinar will last for an hour. We'll definitely be finished by the end of the hour. We are recording this session as we do with every session. So look out for an email which will tell you when the session is available for you to watch. And all of the slides that you will see are recorded within the session. So don't worry if you miss anything that Chris says, because you can go back and watch it and see them again. On your screen view, you should be able to see me and Chris, but your video and your microphone are off because there are already over 100 people here, going up by the second, so it would be a bit chaotic. But please, as always, use the chat box so you can interact. And with the chat box, just be aware that when you send a message, you have two options of who you send it to, whether you send it to everyone or you're sending it to just the hosts and panelists, which are me and Chris. So if you want everybody to see your message, make sure that you select everybody from the drop-down box in the chat. And finally, you can also use the Q&A box if you want to ask any questions as we go along. And we will be answering your questions as we go. So put them in there and I will feed them across to Chris when we have the opportunity. And of course, anything that you want to put in the chat as we go along, well, I'm sure you will, because you are the Transformative Teachers webinar audience, and you're very enthusiastic, which we love. Okay. All right. So, Chris, Walklett has just disappeared.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome, Chris.
Hello.
What's
Hi,
the weather? What's the weather like where you are?
Disappointing today, but it's been nice the last couple of days, as you say. There's some kind of some bulbs coming up, some bloom, crocuses, daffs, snowdrops and the like. Yeah, but today's a little bit damp.
It's a bit damp here too, a bit grey, but it's okay. We just count our blessings, right? So Chris is an educator, an English language teacher, a teacher trainer and an author. He is also a man of culture. He's a historian, and most importantly for today, he is a huge fan of music, both for his own life as a form of relaxation and inspiration, and in the classroom. So on the back of Chris's many years of experience of using songs and music in the classroom, he has developed a series of resources. He has teaching tracks, which is a series of books, and he also has training tracks, which is an online bespoke course that offers training for using music. So Chris is going to share his enthusiasm and his experience with us today. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Yeah, I should share my slides, I take it, at this point.
Yes, please.
That would help, wouldn't it? So first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much, Lucy, for the introduction. It's an absolute privilege to be here today, and seeing all those the people, the countries that people are from is just amazing, really. And you know, we sometimes are critical of things in the modern age, but I think this is wonderful that we can be together in this space, isn't it?
Mm.
So yes, so I'm I think as Lucy said, really, I'm a huge kind of advocate really for using songs in the classroom, both for all sorts of purposes really, not least of which I think is the way they can be used to educate and build awareness of global citizenship issues, which is what we shall look at today. If my slide is advancing. Oh dear, what's going on?
Oh yes, is there a little arrow
There it
at the
goes.
bottom? I had a problem with it today. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no,
It's a
it's all
Zoom
right now.
feature.
Yeah, it sometimes
Okay.
happens on Zoom, doesn't it? Yeah. So as it says there, the webinar will explore how songs focus on global citizenship issues, and we'll have a definition of that in a second. But we're talking about things like social, political, environmental, and economic concerns, amongst other things, and how songs can be employed in the ELT classroom so that we can build students' awareness of things that are happening, really meaningful things that are happening in the world around them. Teenagers and young people generally spend a great deal of time listening to music. I had some figures here. 82% of teenagers listen to music every day. The averages, depends where you go, but sort of 2.5, 3 hours of active listening, not passive listening. You know, and it's still the favorite activity for teens of all the things you can do with your time. So I think that there's no doubt that songs and crucially their lyrics, which is mostly what we're looking at today, offer huge potential in the language classroom for exploring issues related to global citizenship. And what I'll do is offer suggestions of how to tap into this resource for use in the English language classroom. And I'll put forward ideas as to a bunch of songs really that could be used to explore these issues. And I'll make suggestions for how you guys, teachers, might best employ what they have to offer. And the issue of whether any subject is too taboo, rather, to be discussed, or indeed whether to use songs with controversial themes and language will also be addressed, and be welcome to hear your views. And I appreciate they will be different depending on where in the world you are. So what is global citizenship? Well, I won't read that out to you, but that's something from the UN about what global citizenship is. In fact, what we did, me and Trinity, is we said, oh, let's have an actual sort of bunch of definitions so we know what we're talking about. And we ended up with things like this, and I think they're all valid. So feeling like you're a citizen of the world, believing that we all have a common humanity and that we're all of equal worth. The ability to use and share the Earth's resources fairly, and also upholding human rights. Understanding that decisions in one part of the planet can have an effect on another part of the planet. And also being open to engaging positively with people of other identities, being able to recognize and challenge stereotypes when we come across them. And I think in many ways we could sort of use the words of Julian Lennon, that's Julian, not John, his son, when in his song Saltwater, he says, you know, we're a billion children rolled into one. So when we're talking about global citizenship issues, we can equate this, I think, to issues of social justice, by which it's often stated in terms of a dictionary definition. It's justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within the society. I came up with this kind of definition that I thought was helpful, that social justice is a political and philosophical concept, that all people should have equal access to wealth, health, well-being, justice, and opportunity. And I think really within that definition, I'm trying to highlight that it should incorporate social and emotional issues as well. And I don't know if anyone was there, but in IATEFL in Glasgow in 2017, the novelist and ELT person J.J. Wilson came out with this definition. Social justice is a world which affords individuals and groups fair treatment and an impartial share of the benefits of society.
So, Chris, do you think that a lot of these ideas that you've mentioned are quite sort of recent ideas in terms of the public at large viewing things in this way? Do you think there's been a shift in recent years, or do you think people have always thought of things in this way?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you call recent, I suppose. As a historian, my idea of sort of recent might be different to other people's, but I think this is a concept certainly that has been actively pursued since, it's hard to put a date in it, but some point in the 1980s, you know, I would say that people are starting to think like that.
And so do you think that musicians like Julian Lennon,
Mm.
do you think they were ahead of their time? Do you think that maybe musicians have been thinking about these issues for longer than the general public have?
Well, I think, to be honest, you know, by the nature of decent musicians, that's what they often do, isn't it? They're often ahead of their time, which is why a lot of them, the decent ones, never really go out of fashion, because they were so far ahead of their time rather than following.
Right.
So yes, you might be right. In which case, you could go back easily to the 1960s, you know, to the 66, 67, somewhere like that, as you know, wider thinking about the world, and people not thinking so much on a basis of thinking about their own country.
Yeah, well, I know that you're going to talk a little bit about the history of some of the important sort of social justice issues that came up since then. And I see also in the chat somebody mentions rap here as well, and how students relate to that. I think that's something that you found as well, isn't it? That rap
Absolutely.
is very valuable. Yeah. So you're going to be talking about different genres, I think, of music. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Rap's come up a few times here.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Great. So I think if we're trying to get our heads around this, and you know, what sense of duty we should have, we could take heed of the poem by Alan Maylie that we're gonna look at now. And myself and Lucy are going to read this between us. Lucy's going to do the blue bits and I'm going to do the orange bits. Hopefully this works, because it's a bit tricky, a bit adventurous.
What do you do?
I'm a teacher.
What do you teach?
People.
What do you teach them?
English.
You mean grammar, verbs, nouns, pronunciation, conjugations, articles and particles, negatives and interrogatives?
That too.
What do you mean that too?
Well, I try to teach them how to think and feel, show them inspiration, aspiration, cooperation, participation, consolation, innovation, help them think about globalization, exploitation, confrontation, incarceration, discrimination, degradation, subjugation, how inequality brings poverty, how intolerance brings violence, how need is denied by greed, how isms become prisons, how thinking and feeling can bring about healing.
Well, I don't know about that. Maybe you should stick to language. Forget about anguish. You can't change the world.
But if I did that, I'd be a cheater, not a teacher. Thanks, Lucy. Hope everyone enjoyed that. It's something to think on, I think, there by Alan. Looking now at some of the theorists' thoughts on this, in a paper that they wrote, it was actually a book, I think, by Levi and Bird, they called "Why Can't We Be Friends? Using Music to Teach Social Justice." They examined the positive use of songs at all school levels, so elementary, middle, high school, as well as higher education, different disciplines and purposes. And they basically came to the conclusion that music as a resource for exploring social justice issues, global citizenship issues and the like, is underused and overlooked. And that music shouldn't really be underused and overlooked, because it can help educate and lead people to a greater understanding of these kinds of issues. It can inform individuals' beliefs, actions, and worldviews. And they believe that using well-chosen songs can lead to discussing a range of societal problems, accepting others, challenging discrimination, examining privilege, and rejecting violence. And they conclude that the more people understand their own and others' human rights, the more likely this is to bring us all together and to bring about the start of a just and fair society for everyone. So what genres are best? Well, so this was the book was kind of a compilation on different academics and theorists' thoughts. And someone called Lane, in that book, in an essay that they wrote called "Keep on Rocking in the Free World," talked about, as in the second part of the title there, the advantages of using rock and roll in teaching social studies and promoting using songs in this field. And they came to the conclusion that there was a whole bunch of advantages, including the fact that you can build critical thinking skills by using this genre, by that also you can deal with social issues, evaluate historical occurrences, and you can provide a kind of contextualization for art and music by placing them in the societal context in which they took place. So I think, just to end that, I mean, Lane believes that songs are by their nature interdisciplinary. They're highly motivational, they're engaging, they're accessible, and they have longevity. And that lessons using songs are remembered for far longer than more traditional lessons. But it's not just rock and roll. Some teachers of a certain age perhaps might be under the assumption that social commentary in music reached its pinnacle in the late 60s and early 70s that we talked about before. But instructors may find that students hold kind of stereotypes about certain genres of music. But exposing students to a variety of genres challenges them, it enriches their learning experience. So,
Chris, what sort of stereotypes might the students have?
Well, so there might be sort of an obvious one, to quote there would be, and it's always terrible to discuss stereotypes, isn't it, and how you come out with it, but that kind of like rap is all about thuggery, for example. That might be a stereotype that comes out.
So it's violence and it's negative.
Yeah, or that rock and rollers are always taking drugs or something like this, and there's no intelligence to what they're saying.
So do you think that puts students off? Perhaps they think, I'm not going to listen to rap music because it's all this negative thing, and then they avoid it completely.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if they think, oh, that will, you know, if their parents are sort of saying, or they think this will corrupt me, and I don't want to get involved in that. But you know, in a way, that's a stereotypical reading of something that's very, very complicated, isn't it?
Right. So you think there's plenty of rap, rock and roll in any genre that's going to have positive, helpful, inspiring messages?
Yeah, I think majority of decent, I say again, songwriters, you know, they have something to say, you know, and you know, very rarely, or you just tend to avoid it if the message is nothing but things you don't want to talk about, right? Just the very base things in society.
Well, I suppose you did say that part of global citizenship is about challenging stereotypes, and that could be stereotypes of what genres of music are. So it's it's worth being aware of.
Yeah, when of course these are very wide as humanity, right?
Yeah.
You know? So basically, you know, it was said in this work that don't ignore other genres, you know, don't think stereotypically about things like punk or hip hop or rap or grunge or indie or alternative. You know, they're all examples of, as White and McCormack said, music genres that continue to provide considerable social commentary and historical reference. So thinking beyond the cliche into the deeper meaning of it, really.
So there's just a really interesting point that's come up in the comment in the chat box here. One person has said that students might listen to music, I'm not sure what type, but with a sense of guilt. So do you think that do you think it's sometimes complex when teachers are using music in the classroom because students may react to it in, I don't know, how do you think teachers can help students to listen and enjoy it? Or maybe they can't, maybe it's just that's the individual response of the student.
Yeah, I mean, the teacher has to vet it in terms of it'd be very risque to just go to randomly to a song, wouldn't it?
Yes.
You don't do that with normal teaching materials anyway, do you? You prepare, you know, you look at what issues could come up here, whether it's a grammar issue or whether it's a cultural or moral issue. That's something that you would do, I think.
Okay.
You don't know, do you? But I think strong reactions, there's different kinds of reactions, aren't there? And sometimes strong reactions can have good motivational learning value to them, I think, you know.
Maybe they start with a sense of guilt and then they come out of the class and think, actually, that was great, that was fine, and
well, we can go back. I mean, I was going to say here, don't ignore rap. We can go back to rap, and we can talk about the stereotype of the thuggery, and then we can talk about, we find all sorts of examples of quite the opposite of what you might think, you know. Rappers, you know, warning people of the dangers of drug addiction, rappers, you know, exposing the oppression in particular societies. We're going to have some examples later. In fact, the examples I think come now. So what I've done here is I've kind of done a potted history of Western music, and it's quite difficult because what I've tried to do is kind of compartmentalize, you know, particular songs or genres with particular issues that come up. And a starting point, often done, there might well have been and probably was protest songs before then, but in 1939 was Billie Holiday when she came out with Strange Fruit, a shocking depiction of racism and racial hatred in the USA. Issues just sort of slightly post-war in the USA came out with folk artists like Woody Guthrie, who was very into you know, land rights. Well, song was that him that did Little Boxes? Was that was Pete Seeger, wasn't it? Yeah. Comment about, you know, housing, you know, and that people aren't putting value into that anymore. To sort of then go on about sort of genres more specifically than actual sort of artists or songs. In the 1960s, we go back to 66, 67, where people are challenging the world around them perhaps for the first meaningful time, where we have rock and folk singer-songwriters coming out with anti-establishment, questioning the way things are, you know, questioning the capitalist system, questioning the war in Vietnam, if you're in America. Just over the water, a bit further down in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, we have ska originally, and then reggae artists, late 60s, early 70s, demanding, as Peter Tosh called it, equal rights and justice. Returning to the USA and to Europe in the 70s, primarily, we have sort of soul and funk and disco, raising issues of racism in society, of poverty, of injustice, and particularly with disco, LGBT issues. Going to particularly Britain and Ireland, but also in America to some extent, and in Europe, punk and post-punk, questioning the status quo of society, the inequality within society, and racism too. 80s indie, this is particularly Britain and Europe based, but coming out with real anti-nuclear comment and protest, raising issues of environmentalism, you know, 40, 50 odd nearly years ago, you know, and also talking perhaps, well, I don't know, perhaps for the first time, but in a lot of depth about personal things that are affecting them personally, and trying to relate to their listeners in that way. Going back to rap again, particularly for me, the meaningful phase of rap is in the 80s and the early 90s, where it really does take an interest in highlighting society's injustices. And then we have a bit of a gap. I'm not saying there wasn't any protest music. There were songs. Whether there was any movements is a little bit debatable. We had a bit of a hiatus, but protest is very much back, I think, here, looking at Black Lives Matters issues, gender issues, and wider political issues of all different types. So going back to these theorists, so along with the diverse music genres that we talked about briefly there, instructors could and should select singers, I think, from diverse backgrounds, because this can, as McFarlane says there, bring experiences and voices other than the teachers into the classroom. That is always an issue, isn't it, in the classroom? There's really, in many ways, only you, and you want to represent the outside world a lot better. And this is one way of doing it, because it opens up our awareness of difference and our recognition of similar universal themes and experiences amongst us. There'll be a reference list at the end for people that are interested in these thoughts. So they think that using songs should encourage students to think by examining, evaluating, challenging the assumptions, premises, interpretations that others have taken for granted. And White and Cormack think that well-facilitated group discussions are especially beneficial in exposing a wide range of students to diverse perspectives. I think that the resource of songs and song lyrics can and should highlight weightier issues. Thoughtfully selected songs are the best way to bring up issues such as social issues, cultural issues, political issues, and sort of so-called controversial issues. Of course, what's controversial for one person is maybe less so for another. But similarly, it can also be used to explore personal issues that I talked about before, that students might otherwise feel a little reluctant to discuss. I think the reason for songs offering these possibilities seems to be that the resource has the ability to depersonalize such concerns. So effectively kind of discussing them at arm's length, I think, when the ideas come through the words of the songwriter or the eyes of the singer, you know, what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, and how they're commenting on it. And I think that's kind of the fact that it's a step removed seems to be appreciated by students, certainly when I've used it anyway. What can be discussed? Well, I think, you know, the sky's the limit. Let's clarify that a bit. The limit will be, of course, as you know, the tolerance of your institution, your students' ages, cultural limitations. The limits will also be your own personal limits of what you think is acceptable or not in your classroom. And of course, this is your call. So here are a couple of ideas to gauge what they, that is your students, would like to talk about.
Okay, so Chris, I suppose that in this webinar you're giving suggestions of songs, but of course the songs that you're going to talk about will be things that you've done with your classes that have been appropriate for them. But I can see how this would be a very personalized issue. So each teacher will need to choose what they feel is appropriate.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a bunch of examples coming up, and obviously, I mean, I think, as I've said there, really, you know, the limit is these kind of factors, isn't it? You know, what will your school tolerate? What will the director of studies tolerate? You know, what is the norm in the culture which you're in? It could be that the sky's the limit. It could be that there's a lot of restriction.
So you're not advocating particular things in the classroom. You're just advocating using songs in ways that can help the students in
absolutely. Yeah,
I mean, ways, really.
I don't think you could advocate not knowing people's different situations.
Yeah.
We all know our own situations, or probably hopefully feel we do. And within that, but what I should do, I think, is give some ideas, and I'm sure that there might be, you know, might be the ideas, there might be some that people can use and some that they wouldn't use, but this is
great. Yes.
So this is an idea, before we get to the actual songs, this is an idea that came from a colleague of mine called Carol. She might be here. I can't see a list of people, but I'm sure she won't mind me coming out with this. So it's called Bag of Issues, or you could call it a bin of issues, but that doesn't sound so good. So how to get your students talking less directly about what's concerning them without asking them. So here's an idea, and I think this is a good one. So get them to write down an issue that's worrying them or concerning them onto a bit of paper, scrunch it up, throw it in a bag or a bin. I say bin because you want to make sure it's not too dirty, it's quite clean. But what the teacher then does is perhaps surreptitiously, you know, without the students really noticing, they can collect these up later. And they've got some ideas there as a basis for songs that they could look for to address some of the concerns that affect their particular students. So I think that's a nice one now, and I've tried it, and it's interesting. Obviously you're in charge then, because you can pick what's what. Another idea comes from sort of in terms of subject area from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure most people are familiar about. They came out with 17 areas, and there's a little link there, and the areas should be probably known to people: no poverty, zero hunger, etc. But what happened here was the English language teaching world kind of picked up the ball and ran with it, and the British Council produced this book highlighting how the ELT industry could assist. Now, there was no songs in this book, probably should have been, but there wasn't. But these are themes that one could easily find some songs related to some of them, and a starting point for subject areas, I think. I think most people should be familiar with this, but this is a link to the PDF of materials. Like I said, there's no songs, but a whole bunch of interesting materials related to the 17 SDGs. So, songs as a way into discussing themes, because that's really what we're doing. We're saying, okay, so we've kind of justified the use of these. You know, what can we do with these songs, mostly thematically, although of course the language and the theme are hard to extricate often, aren't they?
Oh, Chris, sorry, a couple of things. First of all, just to let you know, we're halfway through.
Sure, no problem.
And the second thing is, there's a few questions coming up in the chat. I think people are wondering about lower levels. So are you going to be discussing the way that things can be used with different levels, or do these more focus on higher levels and then the teachers might find ways to adapt them?
I think from the 6 examples I've got today, you'll find there's quite a bit of scope there. The lower levels thing is very interesting because I've really been paying attention to that. In fact, TEFL this year and also NATECLA later, I'm presenting on using lower levels because it's fascinating. I don't have many lower levels as well, so it's quite experimental. But I think you'll see that with the examples, there is some flexibility because, well, it depends how you handle the actual lyrics, really. It depends whether you desire students to have 100% understanding of 100% of the words. If you do, that would limit it somewhat. But I think that's not the way to go. You should be using really songs as a kind of springboard. So that means a lot of songs can be used at lower levels, I think.
And I think my experience of using TV programs with elementary and pre-intermediate levels, if you design the questions in a way that help them to understand the main points, they have a great sense of satisfaction. And with lower levels, they still may want to discuss those higher level issues, and they'll find a way, won't they? So
yeah.
So why not give them the opportunity, I suppose, to talk about those things and just pull that language out so that they can try and express themselves. Great.
If they have enough language to understand approximately the thematic area and some of the words and some of the sentiment in the song, something can be done with it. And I think you'll see from the example that there is, you know, you could go to make it something suitable for a very high level class, and you could probably do it that it was suitable for a very low level class. You know, probably more inhibiting would be the age, perhaps, you know, because if you don't have in your own language the knowledge of some of the subject areas, then I don't know where you go with that. But I think in terms of, you know, if there's sort of an age of 11, 12 there with a good, decent world knowledge, with the kind of education you get nowadays with kids using the internet, there's a few possibilities.
Great. Okay. Right.
So, I mean, this is very, very general. What can you do with song? And this is to show that it's applicable at lower levels, really. Just, you know, listen to this. What was the mood of it? You know, not necessarily picking up any particular words, but how does it feel? Is it a happy mood? Is it, you know, does it worry you or something in the song? You know, how do you feel? You know, and explain your way around that. Perhaps a little bit higher level, you know, what point of view, what POV is this coming from? You know, do you think the singer's talking about their own perspective? Are they generalizing out? You know, what are they doing, and how do you know this? You know, and you'd be surprised, you know, what knowledge of the world they already have. Their schemata, I believe it's called. If we're talking about after listening work, you know, get them to consider the following. You know, just write down anything that you hear, anything, you know, what did you remember? What stuck out for you? Because of the way it was said, or because it's a word you recently acquired, or whatever. Perhaps for ones of a higher level, when a whole line is possibly memorable. You know, what did you understand by that line? What do you think they meant? Did they mean what they said, or was it sort of, you know, meant in another way? And then, of course, the trying to piece these together later on for a series of activities, which, you know, if you stage these lessons right and you think about how you're staging it. So what was that song about, really? You know. So obviously lots of things could be addressed in the classroom through songs. So, but what I've done here is I've picked 6 areas that I don't think are, hopefully not hugely controversial, but they push the envelope, so to speak, a little bit. and come out with an example song and some ideas. And I'm sure people will have, because they always do, some better ideas, some more detailed ideas about ones they want to use. But these are quite general, and as I said, quite applicable, I think, to a wide range of levels. So first song, and what I've done here every time is I've given a QR code to one of the good videos. And if you snap that at some point with your phone, it will take you through to the video. I don't know how you could store that, but you could take a picture of it and then take a picture of it with another phone. But that will take you through to a video. So this is Edwin Starr, War. What could you do? Okay, so the concept there is talking about conflict, talking about the futility of war. Obviously, lots of war. One particular one raging at the moment. It's hugely concerning. Depending on the level, have you ever heard the expression, the war to end war? People think it's the war to end all wars, but actually originally it was the war to end war. When do you think it was first said? Not necessarily, well, there is a right answer, but it's just a talking point. Slightly more complex in terms of language, but they'll understand the concept maybe. Some Latinate languages, maybe it'll be a similar, be a cognate. Do you know what an oxymoron is? Do you think the concept of a war to end war is oxymoronic? Carrying on like that. Why are there still wars today? What are these wars about, do you think? Getting them thinking about, oh, it's just bad people. Well, it's a bit more than that, isn't it? What do you think's going on? Why is this country doing this to this country, do you think? It's all about discussion, but discussion on important issues. Getting them to use a mind map to do that as well. And then present the song after you've had a decent intro, for example, to this one. Present the song, listen to the song, the video's there for you to look at later. What's the viewpoint of the singer? What does he think about war? How do you know that? What language does he use? Is he angry? Why is he angry? What would he like to happen? So I think, don't know what you think, but relatively lowish level could be adapted to be such, maybe not oxymoron, but moving now to another one. So when we're looking at environmental disasters concerns, there's lots of songs that you could go to here. But I went to the same one that I used the example from earlier, Julian Lennon's Salt Water. Different approach this time. Listen to the song. What examples are there of echo grievances? You could change the terminology with a lower level class. When you've listened to the song, given those examples of echo grievances that you heard, damage to the ozone layer, pollution of the water, etc. What's the message as a whole in the song? Go to the lyrics. Where in the lyrics tells you that? I did this on one of you mentioned my training tracks courses. I did this, and one student picked this up and did a whole project based around it called There Is No Planet B. And they used a whole bunch of songs to present on environmental issues, which was really, really interesting and motivational, I think, for the students. Then analysis of particular lines depends a bit on your level, of course, but what does this mean? The quote that we had earlier, we're a billion children rolled into one. Is this meaningful, really, in a diverse world? We have the very, very rich and the very, very poor. What level can you buy into this? And in other expressions, it's an interesting song, time is not a friend, as friends we're out of time, things like that. Like I say, the QR codes for one of the videos are here with all these songs. So yeah, this is never never an easy subject to deal with, bereavement and loss. I picked a song actually when I first heard it, I thought it was about bereavement and loss. I think that's because of when I first heard it. But it turns out, according to the songwriter, it wasn't about that. But it's still interesting because I use it about that for various different reasons. And I thought a bit higher level this, but given what's happened in the recent pandemic, haven't a lot of us started to confront the notion of death, people generally dying, the figures we were given and the realities of individual numbers, and also the mortality of those that we love and our own mortality too. Haven't we started to think about these things? And I thought that was an interesting topic, really. This might be too controversial for people. If there's people in the class that have suffered a recent bereavement, this, could cause problems. But a way into this, well, aside from missing the people around you, so it's not about the death of people, this lesson really, but what would you miss most about the physical world? So it then becomes something, I suppose, about the environment, which is what the lead singer said it was actually about. Can you turn these thoughts, discuss them with other people? Can you just turn these thoughts into sentences and give reasons? And something simple there, I'd miss animals, particularly cats, because, you know, and you try to explain why these things, trees, cats, birds, why they mean so much to you, you know, and it's a difficult thing to do in your own language, let alone an L2, but it could be quite rewarding, I think. So discuss these ideas with other students, quiz them. You know, why would you miss these things? You know, what do they bring to your life? You know, and I think in doing so, we can look at the idea of valuing what's there, you know, and also thinking about the loss of things, as is happening, of course, with the planet.
Chris, could I just ask you
Sure.
at this point? So, in terms of using the song in the classroom, so you would maybe, as you suggested, have some discussion around the topics perhaps before they listen,
Yeah.
and then how much time would you spend maybe in the classroom listening to the song and looking at the lyrics, and would that just depend on the kind of lesson you wanted to do? So might it be that you just listen once and then you just do a discussion on the topics for the rest of the lesson? Or
well, they're so amazing for that on their songs. You can really do whatever you like. You can do that. You can just use it as a sort of general intro. First time I ever used a song, that was what it was. It was my first ever teaching training session 25 years ago. They gave me some materials, as they used to, on okay, so you're teaching this unit on of this headway or whatever it was, on superstition. Okay, so I just played Stevie Wonder's Superstition. First thing I ever did in the teaching classroom was play music. So you've got that, and that's one end. And then the other end is you can make it into projects, like I said, the student did before, that last like a whole term. And, you know, really everything in between. So, you know, it's there, and it's up to you really to explore what you want to with it.
so, you know, I feel a bit nervous sometimes about using songs in the classroom because I think, oh, you know, are they going to understand the lyrics, and how can I make it interesting? I don't want to take something great like a song and then take all the fun out of it by analyzing it too much. And if we listen to it too many times, they get bored. So I guess that you're actually looking at this in a much more open way than I think I have before. You really can just use it in any way you want. It doesn't have to be in a particular formula.
You absolutely can. I think I couldn't have put it better myself. You know, there's you could do anything. You can do anything you want really with this, and it can be used as the main input source. If you've picked a song that's thematically very good, if you want to do language work on it, you know, that's also linguistically good, you've got something that you can do a lot with. And as you say, it might be the point of, you know, you're actually having to stop. Use Pink Floyd's Money, and after sort of several 5 or 6 hours with a class, you know, just like, well, better move on a bit, you know. And because but they were quite happy probably, and it was sort of me that made the decision really to move on and not them.
So I think I probably, I think I probably look for songs where the language, I'm trying to use it to teach language, but maybe that's limiting me so much, and also maybe making me choose songs that are a bit boring because I'm focusing on language rather than the effect of them. So perhaps a beautiful song that sounds great, that has a nice message, something like that is actually much more useful overall.
I think so. I've always thought that was a little bit like the tail wagging the dog, and I've never quite understood why people did it that way round. For me, it was always like, go for the theme first. And if there is a language point you're getting to in a thematic area, well, if you can combine them, that's perfect. And it's sometimes possible to do that. You know, might take some time, but you know, we've got the internet now, we've got Google now, you can find things out really quickly. It's not like the old days we had to be like a kind of mastermind, you know, to know all this stuff, or some real muso, you know.
Great.
It's doable, yeah.
Right.
The last thought there was just, you know, just to take a particular line and do something with it. And one of the interesting lines in that song is "Still have too many dreams." That should be 200, I think. Oh, typo. Still have too many dreams, never seen the light. Yeah. what's that about? You know, and then you can have some interesting discussions there, I think. This came from another source, this one. So this is from David Mearns, who's not someone I know, but just something I found on the internet. It's the same kind of idea, just put with a picture, but, you know, reflecting on Phil Collins's Another Day in Paradise, you know. Obviously the sarcastic, ironic, or whatever use of the word paradise, because it's about homeless people and being passed by people, and what is our responsibility to others, you know. So there's some nice ideas there, I think, and where you can go with something like that. Something that I've produced extensive materials on that I think is very, very usable. On the right there is a flip through book. If anyone takes a picture of that, I'll take you through to a free book to use very extensive materials on Katy Perry's Raw. A couple of things highlighting here, really. So the topic area, thematic area, the rights of women, equality, emancipation and the like, discussions that can ensue. Do women today have equal rights with men? Discussion could take place on wages in sports, all sorts of things like that. If not, in your particular country, what needs to be done is what are the barriers to that? You know, it's probably emotive, but, you know, I think the best topics are, in a way, really, and it's up to the teacher maybe to manage how that goes on. Listen to the song. What's the situation in the song? What happens as the song progresses? So less widely thematically and more looking at the actual theme within the song. It's an interesting one, this, because in the song, I don't know if anybody knows it, she quotes from Muhammad Ali and she quotes from Malcolm X. So she quotes from, you know, two African Americans. Why does she do that? Why is she likening there? So what do they know about the struggles that African Americans traditionally have had in America, the racism, etc.? And how has their struggle, in what way is their struggle similar to the struggle that women have had to endure? Is that why she decides to use that in the song? And if so, in what ways? So lots of discussion points, I think, with that one. The last one of the six I've selected is to do with optimism in difficult times. And I'm going to use some ideas from a colleague who I referred to earlier, I think is here today, Carol, who did this with a particular class and then told me about what she'd done. So the class profile for this song was an ESOL class, which, for those of you who don't know, in the UK is asylum seekers, refugees. She says that the age group was 16 to 19. They all fall different backgrounds, but the kind of countries that you get refugees in from in Britain, countries that are really going through it. So at the time that might have been places like Syria and Afghanistan. Now that would of course be Ukraine as well. The aims of the lesson was to kind of create a kind of bond in the class, to inspire friendship, create a sense of hope through the use of a song. Because the message of the song was one of don't give up, you know, look to each day with renewed hope. She started off with a warmer where she used pictures to draw out vocabulary. They're a low-level class, if I recall correctly. So she drew pictures of of a smile, you know, what's this? A picture of a smile, or you know, and other things that occur in the song, to draw out what vocabulary that appeared in the song they already knew. The song is quite nice, actually, for low levels. When they were familiar with some of that, then the lyrics were located from, you know, AZ Lyrics or the other ones online, you know. The song was listened to again. There was a discussion on the message within the song. I've added some thoughts on this as well, about making it a kind of really kinesthetic activity, one where students, you know, move around, think and feel and stuff like that. So having familiarized themselves with the song, as was the case earlier, divide the students into groups and give them a verse each. So I guess they probably can't have seen the lyrics or physically have them in front of them. Give them a verse each to work on. Get them acting out the words in the song. Get them gesticulating, using gestures, matching them, lip syncing, miming, etc. Or if they're really, really confident, because it's quite an easy song to learn, quite an easy tune when you've picked up some of the language, get them to sing along. I mean, karaoke, singing along is fantastic in the language classroom, I think. Or maybe a little bit calmer, get them to draw pictures. If they're not the kind that like to sign a sing along, get them to draw pictures of what happens in the song. So they're my examples really of things that can take place. The next slides, really, I'm not going to talk through them. I'm just going to kind of show them, and people can, I suppose, take a screenshot or a photo of it. This isn't exhaustive at all. This is just some songs that came into my mind where they're particularly useful for a particular theme. Yeah, and you probably say, oh, he's missed this. Absolutely, probably have. But these are ones that kind of work on the topics in brackets. So I'll leave that there for a few seconds. There's another screen. There's 2 in total. And by the way, if anyone's got ones that you say, oh, you're missing this, missing that, ping me, please. Contact me.
Chris, there's loads of suggestions in the chat. Fantastic. That everybody's sharing of different songs and topics, and there's a lot of inspiration out there.
Fantastic. I suppose the chat can be saved and I can look at that later, right? That works.
I think we can't save the chat, unfortunately, for GDPR reasons. But we'll at the end, when we finish the session, we'll keep recording for a few minutes. So if anybody wants to look back through the chat, or Chris, you want to look back through, then scroll through and
absolutely
grab those ideas.
Thank you. So this is the second slide. You may look through that. Oh, I'm not using that song. Fine. You know, there's a wide range of things here for you to consider. Some of the topics are strong. The one at the bottom, of course, although the song itself is not just the topic. Other ones, the topic might not be too bad, but the language might be more than you could put up with. There's some examples of rap in there. Got Tupac Changes, for example. Doc Brown also, it's a rap track. Yeah, so that's just some guidance that I think is quite nice. I've always found it quite nice when people give me kind of lists of, you know, it's helpful. It takes a while to gather and everything like that. And as we draw sort of to a close, I suppose, before the questions, I think it's worth going to is it Dom? I think Dom Hamachek, who said that consciously we teach what we know, but unconsciously we teach who we are. So, you know, this is your call. You know, what you decide to do with the range of riches really that are out there is totally, I think, up to you. But I would say, you know, you're missing an opportunity if you're not exploring this and taking it seriously as a resource that you can use in your classroom.
So, Chris, it just sounds like there's such a wide range of things you can do. And it seems like with the lessons that you've suggested, there's so much opportunity for, as you mentioned at the beginning, for critical thinking, because a lot of the things I noticed that you had as discussions were really quite sort of deep questions, not the obvious. It wasn't what do you hear and what does this word mean and what tense has been used. It wasn't that. It was why did this person say this? And then, as you say, these are springboards for further discussion, which can inspire people.
Absolutely.
So, but I imagine that it really, in terms of preparation, what would take time for the teacher to do is to think carefully about how they can first check that they've got a suitable song, and then think carefully about how they can make the most of the theme for discussions, for projects, and maybe also how they arrange the students in the classroom. So do you find big, you know, what do you think? Do you think small groups tend to work best, or whole class, or what are the parameters there?
Mix it up, really. Yeah, definitely mix it up. I mean, as well as mixing up, you know, what you do with songs, I think that, you know, I've always said that, you know, you should let the individual song dictate, really. You know, not like I've got to follow this format, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. It's nice to, if you can analyze things grammatically, and if it lends itself to that, almost always they lend themselves to something phonetically or to do with pronunciation. But by nature, the grammar thing, tenses thing can be a bit forced, I think, sometimes, but sometimes it can be useful because it can be clever in terms of, you know, why is that at higher levels, maybe why is that tense used there, because it's a clever reflection, you know, on something.
Right, but maybe a lot of focus on the grammar can get in the way. I suppose there's so much value in the discussion, especially when students feel very, very motivated and they really want to express their ideas. There's a lot of learning that's happening there.
Yeah.
So you think that maybe some songs are better done in small groups, other songs are better as a whole class. It just depends very much on the
Yeah,
song
I
that you're
mean,
trying to
yeah,
achieve.
as I say, mix it up. But I think you might start with a whole group activity, and it might lead to discussion points with smaller groups. Whole groups, smaller groups. You can mix those things together. But also, it's very important to think about the stage at which you play the song. It doesn't have to be at the beginning. The stage at which you bring the lyrics in. Invariably, that's probably shouldn't be at the beginning, although you might kind of occasionally with one song have a valid reason for that. It's just a bit of thought. I think as any, when you're, people now don't really, do they? They don't really use course books anymore, don't they? Teachers
I think, well, I think it
get their
depends
head
very
around what they're
much.
doing and the order they're going to do it in lesson prep. I mean, you have to do that on a CELTA course anyway.
Yeah,
And
I
I
think
suppose,
it depends where people are, because as you say, it could be that, especially in state schools, if somebody's teaching a state school, then there's a
right.
strict curriculum to follow. So then the teachers are going to look for more creative ways, perhaps, to get the songs in there.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's the thing, isn't it? If you're kind of saddled to having to do things in a particular way, these might help people to get an idea. These are 3 flip through books which you can access there by looking at the QR codes. They, in terms of global citizenship, I suppose the second and third one definitely are. The middle one there, Filthy Lucre, Pink Floyd Money, is about greed and about philanthropy and about the modern world and capitalism and why it is the way it is. And the third one there we've already looked at, the Katy Perry one on the rights for women and equality and everything like that. The first one in the David Bowie one, on Space Odyssey. Let's get it the wrong way around. Space Odyssey, I keep calling it. Space Oddity. It's the film, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I suppose that deals a little bit with the afterlife. What is it all about? Why are we here? So yeah, I guess the issue's there. And what I was going to say is that when you look through what I've tried to do there, it might give people an understanding of how to approach a song. Not like, here's the lyrics, listen to the song, but you can kind of build it up. Start with a warm up, have a reason for doing what you're doing. And attendees will see when they look through these that there's 3 completely different approaches. And these might be worth trying. You might think, oh yeah, that works, that goes better before that, because they then can have some thoughts, and otherwise they won't be given the answer, which is something you've got to watch a little bit nowadays with mobile phones and people just finding the lyrics and things like that. Taking control over the order of things, the way they're kind of presented.
So there's so many options, many options. There's most of the questions in the Q&A have either been things that could easily be answered, or other people have made suggestions. But there's an interesting question here. I think maybe it's how do we evaluate the work done with songs in class? So how do you know if learning's taken place is what I'm wondering.
You could say, how do you ever know if work's
yeah.
including testing, I suppose. For me, something would have taken place if there'd been enjoyment. I hear students saying, I remember one student come out to me and saying, oh yeah, a teacher, like, this is when I was 10 years ago when I was starting all this, they said, oh yeah, about 15 years ago or something, a teacher did this song with me. I was like, what? And now I remember this and this, and they were Japanese, they're speaking perfect English. The learning had definitely taken place there.
Yeah.
Both the memorability and the fact that, I know it's anecdotal, but the fact they've moved on so much with the language.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it depends. I mean, you could easily get them to, as these materials do, that's what I said, produce something at the end of it, produce a piece of writing that goes back and uses some of the language and uses the thematic points. That would probably be the limit of what I would be too bothered about. My feeling would be if the class has, you would know, as you always do, whether the class has gone well or whether it's bombed.
Yeah.
And therefore how well the material is taken with one class and another. And it varies. It does. It varies between having a fantastic time and just think, they quite enjoyed that.
Yeah. So I suppose if you've hit some important emotions or feelings and things like that, then that's something that we tend to remember very well.
Yeah.
More than knowledge and information, perhaps we remember it in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not an obvious thing how to sort of test specifically.
No.
The recycling vocab,
Yeah.
you know, going back to the points that were, you know, if there was a particular rhyme point or particular phonetic use or
I see.
particular tense, you know,
Well,
revisiting that would be cool.
Well, speaking of revisiting, so if anybody wants to check anything again that Chris has said, then remember that the recording of this will be available and you'll get an email when it's ready, and then you'll be able to see all the slides again and see all the examples and suggestions that Chris has made. So I think we have come to time. So I would just like to thank everybody very much for coming today. Next month, we've got Manuela Calzini, who we had last year. She's talking about storytelling, but this time it's digital storytelling, so something for the modern age. And please do visit the Transformative Teachers Facebook page. You can share ideas and keep up to date and see what else is coming up. So I think that's everything. Chris, is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Sure. I mean, this last slide is just links to my YouTube channel on the left there. In the middle, teaching tracks, training tracks, which is one website together. That taking a photo of this or using the QR code will take you there. And my Facebook page, which is incredibly popular, got loads of quite well-known people in the ELT world on there as well that you can make contact with. I welcome everybody. The YouTube's got loads of old videos in it. What I've been doing on the teaching tracks, together with other things about talks and links to things, are all there. And the Facebook page is really anything to do with music. If it's to do with music and language together, even better. You know?
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much, and we'll finish there. So but Chris, if you want to stay, you're welcome to stay and have a look through the chat.
Lovely, thank you.
And get some ideas from our attendees. So thank you, everybody.